Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Mr. Sensible. Tonight is another channel takeover night, the second. I hope you all enjoy this. This is from a new creator called Erudbadhronn. Please go check out his channel afterwards. I'll put the link up here. So, take it away Erudbadhronn. Roll VT.
Hello and welcome. My name is Erudbadhronn, and I would like to say a big thank you to Mr. Sensible for allowing me to feature on his channel. I'm here today to talk to you about the water on a ball, and why misunderstanding the experiment and the evidence does not mean it is wrong. This experiment is perfectly valid if you're taking video of water flicking off a sphere being spun very quickly, but it's not an accurate representation of the Earth in space. Anyone who thinks it is should learn. The Earth is not flat. Let me say that again. The Earth is not flat. Denial of the evidence in front of you does not change the fact that it's there. Being incredulous about the numbers or misunderstanding the theories does not change the fact that the evidence is there. Religion has no basis in fact, and therefore is irrelevant, and does not change the evidence. Being ignorant of the evidence does not change the evidence, and manipulating people is shameful for starts, and does not change the evidence. No matter what you do, the evidence that the Earth is a globe will always be there. We're going to start with gravity, and why it works whether you trust it or not. There are two theories of gravity. They both work with each other and they both support each other. If you don't understand that, you need to learn. Newton suggests mass attracts mass, which is demonstrated by this: the product of two masses over the square of the distance between them. There are people who know more about this and are more knowledgeable who have done videos explaining this, but it's basically the how gravity is related to us, how we experience it in our daily lives. Einstein's theory of gravity is a warping of space-time, or theory of general relativity, I think it is actually. It's the why of gravity. It's why gravity works. It's why it exists. As there is mass creates a warp in this space-time, which creates a hole. Objects fall into those holes depending on how much mass and how big the bends are. Now, it's sometimes referred to as the weakest of the fundamental forces, but just because it's the weakest force does not mean it is not a strong force. Gravity is always there. Gravity acts all the time. The electromagnetic force is fairly strong by comparison. You can lift a nail off a table with a magnet. But if that magnet is 1,000 miles away, you can't pick up a nail. However, the Earth can, with a diameter of over 1,000 miles, much more than 1,000 miles, a radius of 6 times that plus a bit, it has gravity, and its gravity extends a long, long way. The sun's gravity extends a long, long way. Gravity has no real limit. There is no limit to the amount of mass you can have in one area. Now we're going to move on to rotation. The rotation of the Earth is roughly 1,000 miles an hour. It's a little bit more than that, but it's roughly 1,000 miles an hour. It rotates once every 24 hours on a solar day, or 23 hours and 56 minutes for a sidereal day. That's half as fast as an hour hand, which rotates twice every 24 hours. We don't feel the speed. Some people think we should, but we don't. If I was sitting in a car going 1,000 miles an hour, I would not feel anything. If I was to take the roof off of the car, I would feel air and wind resistance, drag. But that is only because I would be moving at a different speed relative to the medium I was going through, the air. That does not mean that I'm feeling the speed. That means I'm feeling the opposition to the speed. But there is no opposition in space. There is nothing there to impact. There is no wind resistance. There is no drag in space. So you don't feel it. We are moving through empty space. We don't feel the speed. We feel the change of speed. If there was a clock in space, would water flick off the end of the hour hand? I doubt it. Certainly doesn't do it here on Earth, but that's because there are other forces in play here. But I doubt that we would see water flicking off an hour hand. And that's twice as fast as the rotation of the Earth. Imagine that. The rotation does create a slight bulge, which changes the diameter across the equator. Makes it different from the north-south diameter. But the centrifugal force caused by that does create a bulge, but it is not enough to overpower the gravity. It does not push the water away from the surface hard enough that it can escape gravity. It takes an awful lot of energy to escape gravity. How much water is on the Earth? Well, the Earth's surface is covered by roughly 71% water. The water on the surface, under the surface, and in the atmosphere is roughly 1,386,386,000,000 kilometers cubed. Now, if the Earth was a completely smooth sphere, fairly smooth already on a general scale, and it's not a sphere, it's an oblate spheroid, so it does have different diameters north, south, east, west. So if we average those diameters, we get 12,734 kilometers. If the Earth was a smooth sphere with that diameter and this amount of water, there would be 2.7 kilometers deep. Now if we divide that depth by that diameter, we get 0.00212%. That's not very much at all. 0.212% of this diameter poking off this side. Sheesh. There are mountains taller than that. Now if we were to scale this Earth down to the size of a standard size 5 FIFA World Cup football, it would have a circumference of 68 to 70 centimeters, which we average to 69 and divide by pi to get the diameter of 21.96338 centimeters. Now if you multiply that diameter by that percentage, we get an average depth of 0.004657 centimeters poking off this side of that football, if it was completely smooth. That amount of water would not be visible to your eyes. You might be able to see reflections of it, but you wouldn't barely notice it's there. Now this is smaller than a football, so it's still not really relevant. But there's too much water there to be a good representation. Secondly, it's spinning far too fast to be comparable. That's not rotating at one spin every 24 hours, is it? No, it isn't. It's also on Earth, so it's going to be affected by the gravity of the Earth. We would need to do this experiment in an environment that is not on Earth. And they won't bother to do that because they don't care what you think. They have provided the evidence. They don't need to continue proving what we already know to you. You do not matter to them. They don't care. The evidence is there. If you are choosing not to accept it, that is on you and not on anyone else. I'm going to talk a little bit now about mathematics. Some people say that math isn't valid because it has no physical properties. You cannot manifest math in a physical way, except as lines on a page. However, math and its predictions are what are valid. What is 2 times 2? 2 times 2 is 4. What are the interior angles of any triangle add up to? What is the sum of the interior angles of any triangle? 180 degrees. Now, if you accept those things, then you accept that math is accurate. Math has had the same amount of time and effort put into it over the time as science has, by some of the same people, in fact. So, if you're going to accept that math is accurate in some ways but not others, then you're also cherry picking there. You can't cherry pick which parts are acceptable and which parts aren't. Math is either valid or it isn't. You don't go to the checkout of the shop and say, I don't believe your math, I want my money back. You know? Math is valid. It gives us the ability to make the predictions that we make using our model. Now, our model, with its predictions, is fairly accurate. There are some things that are more difficult to predict than others, such as the weather. But that's because there are lots of variables involved in predicting the weather. However, we can predict where different phenomena are going to be, like eclipses, We can predict hundreds of years into the future what time the sun is going to rise, what time the moon is going to rise, where the stars are going to be in relative to us, what time of day we need to be, we will see this thing. We can predict for a long way in the future a lot of things based on our model and math. And they are accurate. Just because you don't agree with them doesn't mean they are wrong. Math is either acceptable or not. Science is either acceptable or not. If you're going to cherry pick which parts of which you accept and which parts you don't, you cannot do that. That is like saying, I want to read the Bible, but only the bits that talk about how good God is and not how bad he was. Now I'm going to summarize. Gravity is the reason water stays down. The rotation of the Earth is fairly slow. It does create some centrifugal force, but it's negligible. There isn't really that much water on the Earth by comparison to its size, and the reason it looks like a lot to us is because we are absolutely minuscule compared to the size of the Earth. It looks like a lot of water to us, but it really isn't. You can't do a comparison experiment. You cannot replicate the Earth while on the Earth, and they won't bother to do it anywhere else because they don't care. Math and science are equally valid. The Earth is not flat. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Sensible. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you ever so much for creating that for us, Erudbadhronn. It's great to see someone else's take on things. I really, really appreciate it. Don't forget to visit his channel, have a look around, and maybe subscribe. Before I go, I'd just like to say quick thanks to my amazing patrons. Massive thanks as ever to all my patrons, including new patrons Number 6, Corpus Defectus, Tiffany Hall, Erudbadhronn, Bardtail, Francis Chimenti and William Foley, and my newest patrons Alice Vangstrom, John Roswell and TechBlog. Thank you all very much.
Shut up and sit down.